Good morning, Collegeville Science students. My name is Jacob Allen. Some of you may know me, most of you probably don't. I just want to introduce myself real quick. I'm a peer advisor within the Collegeville Sciences. I work with pre-nursing students, and I'm also a nursing major myself. Today, I have with me Dr. Matt Neese, Director of Counseling Services, and we just kind of wanted to put together a quick little self-care mental health questionnaire interview, whatever you want to call it, discussion, because we know a lot of students are probably struggling out there in a COVID-19 filled semester. I know myself as a student, it's definitely different going from in-person learning to online learning. So we thought Dr. Matt Neese would provide some really good insight into what he's seeing from students. So Matt, if you'd like to really quick kind of introduce yourself, explain what you do and your position here at Boise State.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so I am Matt Neese. I oversee all of the clinical counseling work that's done here on campus. So those who provide mental health therapy. I also work to be involved in really all things mental health on campus. And so I'm a part of the care team. I'm a part of different working groups that are put together entirely to address the mental health and wellness of our campus community, not just the students, but faculty, staff, and everyone involved on our campus. And so that's really my passion and what drives me. And to be honest, we're really kind of moving the needle when it comes to addressing mental health and wellness here at Boise State.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. It's great to meet you. And if you're cool with it, I figured we just kind of hop into the first question and go from there.
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Awesome. So our first question is, when students see you at this time, what are their major or biggest challenges that they're having?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that on one hand, it's not really any different than any other year that I've been here. And that we really have what we call peak seasons, and the peak season is really right now, that time around midterms and shortly thereafter, where a lot of anxiety and depression and even things like seasonal affective disorder and homesickness are really kind of peaking, right? So we are seeing that, but all of those are being amplified by not just COVID-19, the pandemic and the stay-at-homes and all of the different stipulations that go along with, social distancing, physical distancing, but also, I would say just as, if not even more so, is being impacted by the really emotionally charged election that has happened. And now you and I are talking, and it's sort of post-election, though a lot of things seem to still be sort of undetermined. So you take all of these kind of unknowns, a lot of kind of missing information, a lot of really good questions without really definitive answers, and it just amplifies people's anxiety. It amplifies the impact that is being taken like negatively on our optimism, our hope. And so people are feeling more pessimistic. And I guess, Jake, what I try to tell people is that we're sort of moving through our life right now, and we get agitated kind of by almost everything anymore, right? And what's happening is that our agitation or anger is being met with other agitation and anger, because everybody's human, right? Everybody's kind of experiencing the same types of concerns, right? There's obviously different uniqueness and some nuances to individuals' experiences, but everybody seems to be agitated. And something I'm trying to really help people understand is that at the core of anger is actually fear. And so I'm trying to make the case that when you are afraid, we're sort of being conditioned to express that as anger, right? So maybe the inverse of that would be to say, whenever I'm feeling agitated or frustrated or even angry, what I need to do is stop, do a little, mini timeout and say, Matt, what are you afraid of? In this moment, what are you afraid of? Okay, and um, so this fear, this agitation, all of the changes to our normal has not just disrupted, my everyday experience, but it started to disrupt my my relationships. It started to disrupt how I feel about myself, how I feel about my capabilities, how I feel about what my future looks like and what sort of the society's future looks like. All of that is really pretty daunting, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah. And I guess something I want to kind of drive home that is unique to this population, potentially watching this video, is that everybody's trying to figure this out, right? From faculty to staff to our administrators, certainly to students, right, who are having to navigate all the different nuances to how to learn via Zoom. How to do, like we were just talking about, Jake, how to do really difficult work, like difficult courses online. And so the already difficult courses have become exponentially more difficult. And I guess what I want to say is that I talk to a lot of faculty and staff, and they know that, right? It's
Right.
not that they're trying to make it more difficult. We're all trying to come together for maybe like the first time in any of our lives to figure out what's the best way to do this. And so instead of giving your power away and getting angry or frustrated at your instructors or your administrators or certainly yourself, it's recognizing, geez, everyone's really trying to do this for the first time. And to allow yourself grace and other people around you the grace, because the more we come together, the better chance we have of really sort of effectively managing and moving forward on all this.
Yeah, I love that. 100%. It's
It's
funny that
easier
you
said
bring
than
up
done
that.
though, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It always is, it seems like.
Mhm.
I love that you bring up that aspect of fear because a lot of the students that we're seeing, especially in nursing, they are preparing to apply to a program and they're scared. A lot of the questions we get all the time are, what are the minimum requirements to get in the program? What
Mhm.
do I have to do to put myself in the best position? And even not just in nursing, but in the pre-health pathways, they're preparing for grad school. There's this constant anxiety and fear that I might not get into the program that I want. So I think you totally hit on that awesome with that fear aspect, especially in the College of Health Sciences
Yeah, yeah.
with those programs.
And seemingly, I mean, I've never gone through that process, but those fears seem to make sense, right?
Mhm.
Um, but those questions have more tangible answers in terms of like credits and prerequisites and all of that. And so that can be that can pacify my fear a little bit more. But we all are also really asking again these questions of like, when's the pandemic going to end? What's going to happen with our political situation? And nobody really has the answers to that. And so um, what's happening in sort of like a psychological basis is we're being triggered. And I don't mean to be dramatic here, Jacob, or even being a sensationalist, but we're also being kind of traumatized. So if you think about I'll have this make sense in a second here, Jacob. But if you think
Okay.
about emotional abuse, right? A primary tenet of emotional abuse is the withholding of information, right? As a person in control, I can purposefully withhold information, and that makes you rely on me, and in turn makes you doubt yourself. It's a primary tactic of an abuser. Um, and so right now, with there not being any really good information, we don't actually trust that the people in power don't have the information. We're just thinking that it's not being disseminated, right? But the answers do in fact exist. There's people aren't telling us that, or people are withholding information from us. So what that's doing is that fear is triggering these sort of past traumas. So it's making me feel less trustworthy, less hopeful, more doubtful, and just principally afraid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we'll do instead is um, we'll take any information, be it irrational or just completely false, and we'll insert it in that space to try to make sense of our situation, which we all know is just also not helpful.
That's a really interesting point. You really don't know what to believe anymore, especially on things like social media, because there's so much information out there that seems to contradict itself. So it's really hard to know what to
Absolutely.
trust these
Yeah,
days.
absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for that. I think we'll move on to the next question. And this is kind of something that I have felt pretty heavily since last semester and even into this summer and this semester. And that's the idea of Zoom fatigue. So maybe if you can kind of explain why that might be happening or what it really is, and maybe just some ways to kind of overcome it or combat it.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue is new, right?
Yeah.
Because Zoom is new, because our reliance on this technology is new. And so we've been in this pandemic, say, for about 7-ish months. Okay, and so there's been enough research up to this point to kind of um, to bear out some evidence-based results of the psychological impact of some of these things. And Zoom fatigue is very real. And so it's like you and I are doing right now. And for any of those of you who are watching this right now, I, I'll bet the farm on the fact that you are being lured to watching or listening to this, but also checking email, or also doing other work that you need to do, or sending text messages, or checking your social media. And you might be doing all 6 of those things at once. Now, if you think back to, I don't know, 8 months ago, a year ago, before COVID, before everything was moved to online, we would all be sitting in maybe a classroom together, and you wouldn't be checking all these different things. You're multitasking. Um, you wouldn't have the pressure to feel like you had to do all those things, right? And so that's amplifying just that the ability that we have to pay attention, right? It's amplifying um, the stimulus, right? We're being stimulated, overstimulated, and we're already afraid. We just talked about that, Jacob. And so what we're really doing is we're stressing ourselves out more, right? Um, so I'm multitasking. I am decreasing my ability to pay attention to any of the 6 things I'm doing all at once. Right? We're thinking we're being productive, but we're really not, because after the fact, you realize I didn't retain anything. But there's this constant pressure to do more, to respond to those emails, to be present, to do all those things. Okay, so that's one part of Zoom fatigue, is this pressure to be multitasking. Another sort of interesting phenomenon is that you and I don't even know where you are, Jacob, but you're certainly not a foot and a half away from me right now, though it kind of feels like that, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
to indicate to you that I'm paying attention to you, I'm like staring straight into this screen. Now we have, I don't know, 10, 20 more people on the call, and all these different boxes pop up. Now I've got to be paying attention to 20 more people to show them that I, in fact, am engaged. Now, it sounds a little funny, but in times before COVID and before Zoom and everything, I don't have to walk up to 20 different people and stare them straight in the face to let them know that I'm paying attention to them, and for a prolonged amount of time. That's just weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you did that, I'd be like, what's going on here?
Right.
But also, that really drains our energy too. It sucks the energy out of us to be that intimate with people for a long amount of time, or really even a short amount of time. Okay. And then, as you'll see behind me, I really appreciate your backdrop, Jacob, but this is my office, right? And a lot of people have different things happening in their background when you're on the Zoom call. And so again, it's overstimulation. Like it might be more difficult to pay attention to my face, and instead you're looking at all the things that are going on in my backdrop here in my office, and whether you know it or not, like making judgments or determinations about me, or thinking less about what I'm saying, more about the stuff that's going on behind me. Now, a lot of the times I'll be at home and my kids are running around, right? And that's just one more thing for the audience, or for the people that I'm trying to interact with, to have to pay attention to. So all of these things are just draining our energy, right? We're not conditioned, or haven't been up to this point, to be able to filter through all of those sort of distractions I just mentioned and pay attention to the person we're on the call with.
Right, that's super interesting. I didn't even think about all the other distractions that are involved with something
Yeah,
like Zoom. So
yeah.
that's really interesting. Are there any ways that we can try to combat this, or maybe overcome it? Maybe not. Maybe this is just kind of how it is. But
Well, so I mean, I don't know that we really know for sure what's going to be the most beneficial thing to combat Zoom fatigue, since it's such a new phenomenon. But what I'm telling my staff is that, um, you know, there are times where I want to see you, right? That I want your camera on, I want your mute button off, and so it feels more natural to just jump into the conversation, right? But I also will say, and you'll see as I'm doing right now, I'm kind of looking around because I have to look around to be able to like grab a thought sometimes. And so I'll tell my team, hey, or even my clients, you don't have to be staring into the camera for me to know that you're paying attention to me. I'll just trust that that's happening. Okay.
Mhm.
But if we can set the norms and say, look, if you got to turn off your camera, just do so. Be verbally engaged, and just let's all commit to one another that we're not going to be on social media, on our emails, or doing other work while we're on this 25-minute Zoom call or 50-minute Zoom call. Okay. And so
Mhm.
committing to try to decrease these multitasking things and just sort of being present in the same way you would in a meeting in person, um, before this all happened. Just
Okay.
a couple recommendations.
Yeah, just kind of decrease those distractions that might be around.
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
also there's this pressure to where now everybody has a Zoom account, right? You and I might be able to knock out a conversation on the phone, but instead of say, "Gosh, okay, let's jump on a Zoom call," don't do that.
Okay.
The phone is still just fine, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Emails are still just fine. Not every conversation has to be moved to Zoom, and I would just encourage people to sort of let that expectation go.
Okay, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Um, Next question here. So I know I've heard from a lot of students that they're kind of feeling lonely and isolated, especially with COVID-19, having to stay physically distanced. I know when I was a freshman, there were so many events happening that I could go to and meet people. These days, it's mainly happening over Zoom.
Yeah.
So are there any ways that students can get connected, in a safe way?
You know, Jacob, if I had concrete explanation or examples of that worked for everybody, I'd be a billionaire right now, because those are the
Yeah.
questions that everyone is asking, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't actually get into tangible advice in that regard, and I'll tell you why. I'm a counselor, and my theoretical perspective is the fancy way that we say just how I view people, is that everybody's their own expert. Okay. And so something I would advise for you is really what works for me. And
Okay.
you know what's best for you, and I know what's best for me. Now, and I hate to kind of feel like I'm sidestepping this, but it's the truth, Jacob, that you could go you could Google ways to stay connected, and there would be a laundry list of ways that creative people have come up with, and you can peruse that and say, that one will work for me. That, or those other 5 are totally not my jam, and try that out. The takeaway here, though, that I will say, is that staying connected socially is one of the 4 pillars of health, right? You know, the other 3 that are diet, sleep, and exercise. Socialization is the 4th one. And without that, you're just going to be not just psychologically impacted, but physically, right? I mean, your
Yeah.
physical health will also decrease too. So, not to ramble on here, but you did, you said the word loneliness, and I think that's an important thing to kind of differentiate and explain a little bit more. But there's really kind of 2 types of loneliness. And the first one is social loneliness, and the other one is emotional loneliness. And so if I'm socially lonely, that means I don't have like a quantity of friends. I don't have a big number of what I would call friends. right? And that can be problematic when my one good friend is doing something, I don't have somebody else to call on. And so I can feel lonely in that regard. The emotional loneliness is what a lot of us are experiencing right now too, though. And that's when I've got all the friends in the world in terms of numbers. Like I've got a bunch of Facebook followers or a bunch of, friends on Instagram. You can tell I don't know the proper nomenclature, um, but when I'm really stressed out and I need somebody, I don't know who to call, right? My phone is filled with contacts, but I don't know that I could call any of these people and they would really get me. They would really know what I'm going through because I haven't been vulnerable with them and I haven't really let them in, right? So one of the most important things you can do for yourself in terms of socialization and combating loneliness is to be vulnerable and stay connected in whatever creative way you can with the people that have a good sort of historical knowledge of who you are, right? So Jacob, you and I, let's say, are friends from high school, right? And we've stayed in touch periodically, but it's still kind of that friendship that doesn't matter how many months go by, you and I get on the call together and it's like we pick up right where we left off, right? That's an emotional connection, okay? And you can call me and you say, Matt, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, and you're getting down on yourself. And I could say, okay, yeah, that makes sense, Jacob. And don't forget about all those times that you were just a rock star and knocked it out of the park. And remember that time where you thought you were bad, but you really pulled through. And because we're really bad historians, right? Like we forget all of our wins and we need people to remind us of those sometimes, not in kind of a pacifying way, but like a rational way. Like I need somebody to remind me sometimes of when I was just awesome. Okay.
Mhm.
And I need somebody that will not feel like they have to give me advice and just be there to listen. And that's an emotional connection. So if you don't have one of those people in your life, I would really make that a priority to connect with people in that way. And if you do have that, then really deposit some energy into that relationship or those relationships.
That's really interesting to hear. I didn't really think about how they could be very separate, especially in the age of social media where we can have all these followers, but that doesn't really mean anything. And it doesn't really bring us happiness. So that's really cool to hear. And lastly, what kind of resources on campus are available to students who might be, suffering from any, anxiety, depression, any of that social, emotional loneliness that you were talking about?
Sure.
What can they kind of look for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to push our resources, being the counseling director, and so um, I would say that almost across the board, and this is well before the pandemic, but almost across the board, people historically, excuse me, wait until issues become a crisis or unmanageable, or it has negatively impacted a person's daily functioning. And what I want to say is, don't wait. Like, get connected right now. Um, Call, make an appointment, get a counselor, even if it's just like a monthly check-in. I think that's an important thing to have on your calendar and look forward to. That's important. We also have created a lot of groups, and the groups are free. It's an excellent way for students to get with other students, so peers, and kind of normalize and validate what each other is going through. It's facilitated obviously by a therapist who can provide some guidance here and there. But the real beauty of group work is that you're connecting with people on a real sort of human and real level. And so those are two really great ways. Now the Silk, help me out here, Jacob. Silk, student involvement and leadership. C, I can't remember what the C stands for.
I'm not gonna, I can't remember either.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so okay, so obviously the long-standing student organizations and clubs and groups have taken a hit with the pandemic, but they're still going strong, right? They've pivoted and figured out creative ways to really engage students in that way, and so um, I would absolutely encourage people to continue to explore how to get connected to other people from the Boise State community by using that avenue. That's by like, shared interests all the way up to advocacy work. Those are just a few.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. It was great hearing from you. We appreciate all your insight. I know I personally learned a lot from this talk, so I'm sure a lot of students will as well. Really quick, if you want to kind of explain to students how they can reach out to your office if they're interested in maybe setting up an appointment or something like that.
Yeah, sure. And I do recognize this is really quick. I probably talked longer than you wanted me to, but this is really kind of a teaser, and I don't expect this to be something that addresses everyone's concerns. And so, if you're struggling with any of this, I'm speaking to the audience, whoever's watching. If you're struggling with any of this, just give us a call. Our number is 208-426-1459. That's the best way to make an appointment with us, is to call us directly, and we'll get you in. We do bill insurance for all of our services here, but we also never turn anybody away based on their ability to pay. And so I don't want payment to ever feel like a barrier to care, right? And so we're in the counseling center. We're under the health services umbrella, and so it's a one-stop shop. We're in the second floor of the Norco building, and so we're here with medical and psychiatry, counseling, and our wellness team. And if you ever have any questions, emailing me directly is a perfectly fine thing to do to address any of those concerns or questions. So anyway, I mean, thank you for doing this, Jacob. I'm happy to sort of inform some people and let people know that if you're struggling, it makes sense, and you're absolutely not alone.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again, like I said, for your time. College of Health Science students, I hope you guys all enjoyed this. Maybe we'll do some more of these if you guys are really interested in it. Keep doing your best to finish out the semester strong, and we will see you around.